And we've walked into a trap. And we've walked into a trap.
Me I like to party, party with the boys, they get money with it. Go down when the music come up. Go down when the music come up. Go down when the music come up. When the DJ keep them, then they turn up. See me wine, see me the below, see me dance to reggae and calypso. I call, now in battle. Follow me one day, you go enjoy. I'll just spray your money, make all the girls them worry. Oh baby, make we jolly. Today I naughty. Go down when the music come up. They down on myself, we are raving up. And when the music come, we are da-da-dee.
Greetings. I have a topic that I will try to explain in a comic way because it really is also about the games and gang tricks for mind control in Iraq, and they are the gang that has dominated Iraq since the departure of the international forces, and it turned the people's lives into a nightmare and spread sectarianism among its members, and even destroyed the family and family community. This gang, as I said earlier, it is an intelligence network affiliated with the previous regime. This is its bag, which is not religious at all, nor a non-governmental or clan organization, etc., although it uses to that. I will try to give a close description also to this gang, which resembles a security apparatus, which turned against the state and the law, and he used his security character and his position to destroy the state, and the law also spoils, steals, harms, and achieves personal purposes, as if he wants to incite the people against the law, also tears society so that it spreads strife and problems among people, and he makes them one who does not trust the other, etc. He exploits all of his security characteristic and powers that he has, something very similar to a scary film. When a person who was killing women is exposed and he is a policeman with mental illness, he was killed, and at the same time he makes himself investigate and search for the perpetrator. This gang also has other notes about this gang, and they are all working in an intelligence manner, which is a strange thing. What is the relationship of the Holy Spirit with intelligence? And was the Holy Spirit making the person Sherlock Holmes, for example, meaning you give him any knowledge or make him invent a theory or something that benefits people, but rather makes him work intelligence? Why this reason is clear, and it is that its leader in Iraq, who made himself a prophet, is an intelligence officer from the days of the previous regime, and he who drives in this way also uses the cheek with sleeping cells. That's why we find that the police or any security apparatus will never stand with the victim because of the lies of this spy. Of course, there is something that victims may not know about, which is that they are under spying 24 hours, and even her thoughts are read to her here when she decides to go to the police to report the gang. Here is this spy will know them before you reach them. He will call them. He is to lie to them, and, for example, he tells them that the victim works for him and he is the one who sent it to them to report on him, or he tells them that she is a crazy person, or he tells them that they do not hear something from it, also the same thing. 3. When you try with any party or other person, of course, only victims like her will have believed her. For this reason we find that victims of mind control have a kind of cooperation among them, even though the gang has sabotaged this also by making its elements claim to be victims also, when they spread lies and confusion, or throwing charges at sides that have absolutely nothing to do with the matter either. There is another thing, which is that the elements of this gang also had slices planted on them, but not for the purpose of harming them at all, but rather made the gang half human beings or homosexuals and drug users who were happy to plant slices on them and programming them be programs of homosexuality or give them a mutilation etc. And these fools do not know that they have lost their lives due to tissue damage in their brains and will not return again. Also DNA, they have finished, and they left the list of important people that these are not victims. They are understanding elements of this gang. Also the slides are used to protect them or know their place, or giving orders to them through special codes means, for example, a person thinks of them with something and the gang either introduces dreams to him in order to know the orders from them, or perhaps even ideas which are words made up of a very short sentence, very fast, or a signal is given to him by moving the hand, for example, of big belief that the gang has slices of spray type or is too small so that the gang can use people who have no relationship with this gang to spread them, especially in European and American countries. I mean, it is sent. These slides are there. Of course, as I said earlier, studies and research on the subject of mind control in these countries are very weak, and because of the lack of sufficient funding for them, no one has discovered such types of slides, of course, controlled from outside these countries. 4. Of course, there is a wrong idea about the presence of surveillance, cameras and satellites, and this is a mistake. This has 1,000 weaknesses. For example, this gang struck France, and it is one of the strongest countries. So where is the censorship? There is absolutely no terrorism too. Mind control are the most completely controlled by it. Maybe if the war was with airplanes or armies the equation would be very different, but a war for mind control and treachery of terrorism always triumphs. There is another thing which is the PSICSAT. Here I have something added, which is that I have noticed that any party in Europe or America is searching for a mind control openly and for peaceful purposes. The world is rising and the responsibility of every victim is thrown upon it, while they want to develop capabilities only to keep pace with the development means that if this I did not become a counter to this, so that, for example, there are available devices in the airports or other devices that can detect mind control, no matter how difficult it is for any gangs of terror to play with this. An experiment to create antigens and explain to him all the D7 at. Of course, the gang's games inside Iraq exceeded the description. They didn't want to make the people just their sheep, and everyone against them got rid of it and followed a method similar to that of Saddam Hussein. He returned again so that he would take revenge on those who accepted the new situation in Iraq, also everyone who contributed to building Iraq again, of course. This organization is the actual ruler of Iraq. I mean, it is a gang, and that is the one who also controls the government, and it has gangs, and I have seen nothing but demolition only. The important thing is that there is another distinctive thing about it, which is the use of victims of choice to make them or peg of mistakes or something that they throw responsibility for, and this is always a matter that I repeat. Of the gravity of the issue of selection, the victims are almost the most of which do not know that there is a position in which money, property, etc. are forged in its name, but there is another person sitting on it, and this is a despicable thief from this gang, but he claims to be a guard for her or an agent or person who translates and transfers orders from it to the gang, meaning the issue is similar to also, the victim of choice is given a conservative position in one of the cities, but there is another person who sits on that position, but he claims that he is just a victim of the victim or an agent of her. Of course, this is a lie. This position is not her. For example, there are cases that have occurred that some of the victims of the choice revealed this and they tried to sit in this position, or they began to give orders or act as if they were the owners of this position, but what happened is that no one recognized them because this is just a lie, and a care wants the victim just a peg of mistakes only, or so planting birds or something similar to a picture on which they wrote something. Notice that the victim has no hope of obtaining any gain from this gang, no matter how much I try. Of course, I have struck a proverb for you about such a position and may differ, but this is repeated. As for the victims, they do not know anything about it. £8. And they think that it is a matter of faith, or that the gang puts them like a horse and carrot behind things that may be simple, but even this they will not get of them. Of course, this is how he set up fraud, and also exploiting places of worship for hunting victims, also exploiting a sacred issue which is the Holy Spirit and linking it knows the unseen, so that a question is being falsified, which is that the victim has become aware of the unseen for this reason. No one tells her anything. For example, the families of all the victims of the choice are all made members of this organization. All of the friends and acquaintances or relatives you know, and these all will not say anything to the victim because there is someone who made himself a secretary. To the victim, he said to them that the victim works in the unseen and she knows them and remains. He leads them with what he just wants and claims that the victim is the one who calls him or gives him these orders. Of course, as I said earlier and I repeated a lot, that each victim has a specific period of time and then they are disposed of, or they take a position or an organization that has nothing to do with it and does not know anything about it. In the beginning, they say that God gave half of the organization or position to another person, for the organization was divided into two halves so that the victim became only half after it was all to her, and at this stage, which is the second, the war begins on the victim, or what is called a false test. It is also something that many victims do not know about. I mean, why do they test her? I mean, what is the reason that a full gang comes to her and spends on such a lot of money? I mean, are those who follow the victim or harass armed by distorting its reputation? Do they know this for free? For example, of course, not, but a lot of money is spent on them. Here is a question that presents itself. Do they do this for everyone who comes to the Bible church, for example, or does he pray with them? Of course, the answer is no. Why only the victim? 9. The reason is the post office game. Another thing that was repeated with all the victims of choice is that the person who has a gang and attacks them is a homosexual person, and this I think all the victims know this. For example, programs that are entered into their brains, which are games forwarding ideas, sexual programs or jamming programs. Changing moods, manipulating memory, inserting thoughts and dreams, etc. Of course, these programs are either by using the same chip on the victim or other groups are planted on it without knowing there are other things that happen at this stage, which is that this homosexual security agent will use all the victim's family and those you know because they are the organization that the victim was leading them or takes half of them or he has a group of his own, but he will interfere with these or all of their records will be in his hand as he is known to it. Of course, note that the victim at this stage will not know anything except that a gang started attacking it. Of course, the justification for this, the attack is taking the half that was left to the victim. We also see a funny position, which is the position of the person who was claiming to be the secretary of the victim, and he who was sitting on the position. And what is his position? Will only watch and will not he does anything and leaves the victim alone to go to war against a gang, and he might intervene if, for example, he noticed that the victim can achieve victory over that gang, too. He will indirectly assist that gang by lying that the position on which he sits is her and thus will prevent any party from giving any help for her. 2. I noticed lost errors that occurred to some of the victims. They tried to confront the gangs attacking through the half that remained, but they failed because that who was sitting on the post refused to take any orders from them. The situation is like a war between 10 at between the victim and her successor is an army against the homosexual security agent who also has an army, but the difference is that the victim has no authority over one soldier from the army behind her or claims to be with her, or they are the half that remained for her, and the reason is this: that made himself a guard for her or a secretary to her. He is the one who leads this half. He does not take any orders from him, but he only lies so that it causes harm to the victim, so this is, of course. This scenario is repeated with each victim of choice and not one or two. I mean, this is the style of this gang, also these two, and they are this who will make himself a guard or a secretary for the victim, and with him the homosexual security agent are colleagues in one gang and are not enemies at all, and the common enemy for them is the victim of choice only, and they work in agreement with each other and coordination so that one raises and the other is pressed, of course, on the victim of choice facing both sides, although this seems more difficult, but it is the best because this one who made himself a guard for her is the one who protects the gang of the homosexual security agent, and he is an example who distorts the image so that makes the victim like a person who has a position and funds and followers, and there is competition for it. Here is falsifying the truth completely so that he deported all a party or a person can help the victim with this disposal. This is also necessary due to the lack of any benefit to him, only the harm of the situation. This is also a scenario that is repeated with each victim. These are very simple facts about mind control gang games that totally outperformed it as a dirty pandemic. Badness in every sense of the word is the one who becomes a victim of choice, as it becomes like a donkey, carrying tons of on it, and then they throw it, or something similar to a demon that entered the body of a person and started to do evil, and then he left this body and wants to throw all responsibility on this body, but he will go so
And we've walked into a trap.
A mistake. There's no room for mistakes.
Hold on, not talking in bottle. I like to party. Be Shakira and Beyonce from Miami. I like to chilling with Uze and Daisy. Just go down when the music come up. Put it down, I'm like, yeah, we are raving up. Down when the music comes, we are da da dee.
11 at. In order to enter into a new body in the same game, it is repeated with the new one also. God gives him an organization or position, and after a while God retracts what he gave in order to give half to the homosexual security agent, and so the game repeats. Of course, it is very difficult to get rid of this filth, which will make himself guard for the victim, or her secretary is the one who sits on the position and claims that he is her. He says that God appointed him as the guard. This means that he does not take any order from the victim. Of course, the competition is supposed to be with him, but because this is a security agent, both are colleagues, and this is a game they play with each victim. The victim only here. There have been cases where they asked the victim to give up the half that she had or give it to save herself, and this is a fatal mistake if the victim made it because he means getting involved in it. The position is, of course, the only way is to justify and announce itself or define itself as it is. So a fair war is only one person who does not have any followers with him against gangs, and this is a fact, and the victim will not lose anything because she does not have anything. As for the position that was forged by her and someone else sat on it, no matter how much she tried you would not be able to sit on it as to control it or, for example, strengthen them, expel this guard if he does not follow orders from them. This will not be what she tried. She has a role which is a scarecrow, only birds, or a camera placed on a pillar, and it is like a ball between the feet of a gang, and it has to play with them differently than they want, because this gang is a terrorist gang that has benefited from loopholes. He killed him in security and law and hid herself with the mask of religion, while they are all terrorist gang. They are a gang of hyenas, a clan of all hyenas, and the victim has no place in the middle of such a gang, and there is nothing good in them or they can be trusted. Of course, this gang cannot remain like this too. 12 at. I also have some funny games for this gang in the gang. For example, they who incite the gangs of the homosexual security agent against the victim. If they defend themselves here, focus on this self-defense only, not about a position, money, or organization, etc. But they say that this group that attacks the victim, if she competes with her for a position she has, not the truth, and if she is silent about them, they say that she lost, or this ranger thief hands over the half that he has to the group of the homosexual security agent. They noticed the farce, of course. He made himself a guard for her or a secretary, and then after this he gives who he has to the homosexual security agent. This game is very well known, and it is repeated with every victim, no matter how strong the victim is. To lose, and when the victim brings her own food, look what he will do. He will wait until the food ends or plays another game because he lost the argument in the matter of food, so he is looking for another argument that does not. The victim can do something, for example, that makes drinking water, for example, an argument for him or thinking, etc. There is a note on this guard, the thief. He wants to give the position that he sits on, but at the same time he wants to throw the responsibility on the victim who has no authority over him or for this position. 13 at. Running after such a position or envy the victim over him. They do not know the truth, and if they knew they would have escaped. They are also important that the gang is making great efforts to mute the victim's voice from the tech crowd from this position. Also there is a dirty game which is an attempt to make it responsible for any failure occurs or errors. For example, they forged a conservative characteristic of the gang here itself begins with theft and corruption, and on the basis that the victim is the owner of the position and does not punish any of them or live with them or eat or drink or speak, etc. Note the filthy game. Of course, the victim does not have any position for this, ignores all this. Of course, there is something from this scene, and it is that the person who exploits the victim's body is the one who sits on this position and not the victim, and this wants to make the victim's body as if it is something like two people in one body. The victim of the original body is trying to prove anything and has nothing to do with this spy, while he is the other way around, and he wants to publish a liar so that he makes the same secretary to her, and she is the owner of the position, and she is the one who gives him orders. This is the game, of course, in a country like Iraq. This is how injustice is something very natural and not strange. The victim is completely nothing, and this spy wants a cover for himself or a facade or a scapegoat, or wants to lead a gang and hide himself and make another person appear as if he is the leader of the gang, and this person is the victim. Of course, I noticed that the family of the selection victims plays a very despicable role in this game. They are very obedient servants. This gang has another problem. I noticed that most of the victims of the choice in Iraq are the poor or who have no power. I mean, they are very marginalized. Therefore, they are unable to confront the gang. I mean, the people of these people are also poor. This is very easy. 14 pound. They will not do anything and will not implement anything, especially the issue of changing laws, because if they do this the victim will become the
خطرك فظيع يا بلاكي، سأتحمله ولن